Good. Welcome everyone. Just would like to thank you for making the time to join us today. We're really going to be talking about effective spare parts management, and I've got a good panelists here today to really entertain you guys. So sit back and relax. I'm your host, Kribun Kupusamy, Business Development Executive for Pragma. So yeah, let me start with introducing our team. First of all, we've got Enrico Swanepoel. So he's has experience in asset management and spare parts, and by consulting in various industries. He has worked in support of overall asset management best practices, supply chain strategy for clients, and specifically understands the challenges of FMCG, mining and manufacturing industry. He's also been involved with numerous management improvement projects. Enrico's ability to understand complex and technical systems and processes help him to approach every problem with comprehension and patience. He is enthusiastic about the opportunities Africa holds, and he works for Gordian SA. And then we've got Jan Willem, also working for Gordian. He's the MD of Gordian Logistics Experts, a Dutch-rooted company dedicated to MRO, spare supply chain management, with a background as a naval officer, mind you, various deployments and a successful PhD research on spare parts management for capital goods. Jan Willem makes a difference in MRO spares, and as a consultant, he is responsible for a wide array of projects, including clients such as NAMPAC, PPC, and United Nations in Somalia. Passion for supply chain management and maximizing impact, exploring cultures, and South Africa's best wine, and he loves mountain biking as well. Welcome, Jan Willem and Enrico from Gordian, and we really appreciate your time today to share with us your best practice around spare parts optimization. And then lastly, but not least, we've got Nicholas Jackson, who works for Pragma. So he's an electrical engineer by qualification. He's got a background in IT and supporting networks worldwide or South African wide, worked in Pragma support department. He's assisted consultants and clients with our products, from technical issues to configurations and implementations, and lately involved more on consulting and side assisting clients, consultants to understand the integration requirements. And why he's here today is really talk about or give us some insights around integrations between systems. Great. Without further ado, I'll do a little bit of the introduction. And really, we just want to you guys to sit back, like I said, ask questions. And if there's anything you want to comment on, you're welcome to comment in the comment section. Great. So maybe let's take a step back. You know, we talk about effective spare parts management, but where does this really fit into the bigger picture in terms of asset management? And really what we want to talk about is the balancing act of, you know, asset management. And really, if we look at, you know, increasing performance, lowering or reducing your cost and reducing your risk, what are the things that you need to take into consideration? And we look on your left-hand side, we talk about capital, materials, equipment, facilities, labor, supplies, knowledge, and time. And really, those are the inputs that you really have to deal with to see how you can do this balancing act. And obviously, as you can see, highlighted part of it is materials. And hence why we want to focus today to say, let's see how we can give you some insight in terms of managing your materials better, and also getting that data flow you know, into your system so that you can do better reporting on materials. And at the end of the day, why are we doing this? Why does asset owners want to do asset management? It's really about the return on investment. You want your asset performance, you want to improve availability, you want to improve reliability, consistent service delivery, sustainable quality, and maximum asset utilization. And how do you bring the cost reduction down? You want to improve your labor utilization, and there, optimize stock levels. You know, it's one aspect of it. Effective contractor management, accurate repair, replacements, and decisions. And then risk as well. You know, compliance legislation, reduce breakdowns, and minimize risk. Hence, I want to just highlight, you know, part of the cost reduction is really making sure you optimize your stock better. And this is where it fits into the bigger picture of your asset management, making sure you get the best out of your assets. And then quickly, just, you know, in terms of of the bigger picture in terms of your asset management journey, if you look at a typical roadmap, and here we at Pragma like to illustrate it in a little bit of a animation in terms of where you should be and where you want to be in terms of your asset management journey. We talk about getting your foundations in place and then really looking at improving on your foundations. And each client's asset management roadmap will look a little bit different, specified to themselves. But ideally, you need to get the foundations in place. Besides getting your assets and your register all up to date, getting your HSCC in place, the other aspect of it is really to make sure you have proper spares management in place. And if you look at where those spare parts fit in the asset management roadmap, it's really at the end or at the foundations where you do the administration side of things. And then eventually when you got a little bit of a handle on it, you start doing more of an optimization. So the idea is really to say, where does the spare parts fit into? And ideally, how do we go about making sure that we optimize it? And then just talking about key challenges as well. In engineering, spares management has always been a delicate matter. Keeping the status quo in engineering, spare parts may lead to the following two situations. And this is really where Gordian is going to come in and assist us to really understand these challenges. The one is uncontrolled downtime due to lack of spares, uncontrolled growth of stock due to better safe than sorry mentality. You want to keep spares in just in case. And ideally that leads to obviously having spares in your store that you're not necessarily using. And obviously there's capital laying there that could be used somewhere else. And of course, lack of data and reporting, and really understanding once we've got the spares optimization process in place or understanding our spares better, how do we get information better into our system so that we can make better decisions? So yeah, so the purpose of this webinar is really to create awareness and educate you, to how to prevent these situations from happening. And also we'll do this presenting various best practices. Gordian will give us the best practices. We'll get Nicholas to give us a little bit about the technology of how we do the integration. And and then we take it from there. So without further ado, Gordian, you guys are up.
Thank you very much, Ruben. Thanks for the very warm welcome. Maybe you are in sales, overselling us a bit. Yeah, today's agenda is very simple. We want to start with first just visualizing and introducing the practice of spare parts, maybe draw some attention to the frustrations that is often associated with spare management. We again briefly understand why spares and how it fits into asset management, but then we dig into the challenges and the issues, understanding the best practices in terms of what to manage when we talk spares, how to manage, and how to eventually get to an optimization point. So that's very simple, the agenda. And I think let's just jump in. Ruben, you can move on. And before I hand over to my smarter CEO for the more difficult topics of spare management, let's first just do a few confessions on our own spare, shall I call them dirty secrets. On the screen, you see 3 pictures, A, B, and C. And I'd like the audience to maybe in the chat function, just give us an indication of which picture seems familiar to you, which spare scenario can you associate with in your organization. I'm going to give a second or two just for some answers to flow in. I see some A's and B's coming in, a single C, more A's and B's. Thank you, everyone, for the answers, and please feel free to continuously participate during the discussion. When we look at these pictures, I think first of all, there is definitely a few B's. B being the perhaps chaotic nightmare when you think of spares. It is the less idyllic picture, the picture that you want to stay away from as far as possible. A at the top, being an imperfect dream. I say an imperfect dream because it's not perfect, but maybe we should ask ourselves, and maybe we will understand at the end of the webinar, if perfect is really necessary for spare parts. And C is, in a very big organization, a perfect world perhaps, but often not applicable to spares, and more your logistical picture. If you think of logistics and warehousing, often not needed in a spares environment, but very organization specific. So this being the first confession, Ruben, can we go to the next one? So if we think of the age-old relationship between supply, or shall I say spare management, and asset management, well, it's not a friendly partnership or friendly relationship, and it often presents a number of symptoms from an underlying distrust. Maybe an easy question to ask, and again, thinking of your own organizations, is to think how a spare request typically looks. We have a very proactive, polite request, well in time, well before a maintenance job is needed. We have B, a sort of just in time now reaction, sometimes maybe a bit polite, sometimes maybe a little bit less. And C, a very rushed, needed the part yesterday scenario. So maybe you can give us again an indication of an ABC. What do you recognize? Erastus, thank you for that B. There's a few very honest C's coming in. Yes, I do believe, as the answer says, I do think we all strive for an A, but we know it's most likely not the reality. I think in the majority of cases, hopefully we do reach a B, but the C's are there, and we need to understand why and how to address that. So to, for now, stop the confessions, because I think we can continue for the rest of the day. Ruben, if we look at just briefly again, how spare parts then fit into the asset management roadmap, you again see on in the pictures Pragma's typical growth asset management roadmap. Again, the link towards a spares maturity roadmap. The roadmap represented is Gordian's maturity roadmap. But what I want you to look at is two things. One, we all know that the best asset management practices out there, the best engineer, the best system, will still leave you in a lot of trouble if you get to the job and you do not have a spare. So how do we address that? If we look at the two blocks on the Pragma roadmap, we need to understand that these blocks represent a number of actions. On the Gordian roadmap, you see activation, or the foundations being at the bottom, all represented by a single function in the asset management, and then the same on the second layer. There's more to spare management than just listing it and putting it in a store. So I'm going to hand over to my smart CEO to further discuss these difficulties and key issues with you. Jan-Willem, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. You can go to the next slide. Yes, also on behalf of me, very warm welcome. I do not agree that I'm the smartest guy within Gordian. We got some great consultants that outsmart me a lot, but I do think I've got some common sense. But maybe first a little introduction on Gordian. We are a niche player, and we focus on physical assets not to be down due to a shortage of spares. And there can be a number of other reasons that Krim has explained that assets may be down. We look at the impact of spares. So what we continuously strive for is get the best possible spares availability against reasonable working capital and operational cost. That is our reason for existence. Go to the next slide. So there's a roadmap, and you can briefly scroll through that. So this is a mouthful, but it is very important to get your foundations in place. They are often overlooked, that people think we can directly go into optimization or even becoming world-class, applying AI or machine learning kind of techniques when it comes to spares forecasting. But what we often see is that organizations still need to work on the foundations. So, and that is also what we'd like to address today. And you know, we can talk for days about it. Gripen did not give us that time. So we will confine ourselves to the topic of categorization, basic demand management, and the whole stock parameter and optimizing of the spares discussion. So those are the topics that we want to address. If you are interested in other topics, we can always have a discussion later on. So let's go to the first one. As I said, spare parts management is a lot about applying just common sense. And why do you need common sense? And that is because there's just an enormous amount of spares. So you need to categorize. So that's the first thing that you do. So first, from a technical point of view, so you can categorize in terms of critical spares, regular spares, PPE, flammable goods, rotables, tools, etc., etc. So that's the first thing that you do. So you make a technical categorization. Then what you do, you make an inventory categorization, meaning you also make a segmentation in, is it a fast mover or a slow mover? Is it a cheap one or an expensive one? So then you got a first properly categorized picture of your inventory. Once you have that, then you can make a plan or a strategy per category. And each strategy has implications for all the supply chain functions, starting from the maintenance and the maintenance demand functions, all the way towards the inbound flow in your stores. So, and in fact, each strategy should have a certain objective, and all supply chain functions should contribute to that objective in a harmonized way. Let me give you a couple of examples in the next slide. So this is just a snapshot, and I will only address a couple of them. Just suppose if you go to regular spares, and it's fast, medium moving, then normally maintenance said, you know, it is the bits and pieces that they just need to be on stock. We don't want to wait for them. Sometimes there might be a little bit of an incident, but normally they just must be on stock. Also, from an inventory point of view, it is economically the best decision to put them on stock. So and then because it's fast moving, we can use statistical models. From a procurement point of view, you know, you don't want to go out to tender each time there's a request, so there must be actual price list, nothing more, just a catalog contract. And finally, in your warehouse, it is good to have the fast moving parts, let's say, on a short distance. So this is just the idea that you want them on stock, but you want to do it as efficient as possible. That's the main objective, and this is the way that you realize it. When it comes to the slow moving stuff, then maintenance often accepts a certain but predefined delay time. So it must be conditioned. And how do you do that? You don't put it on stock, but there can be price lists in your procurement part, but you need to monitor the lead times very good, and you need to intervene when possible. So the procurement part gets more intense when you decide, let's say, to make some sacrifices in your inventory part. So it's the balancing act in your supply chain. And finally, your stock is or your warehouse or your stores is a cross dock, not so much a store where you actually store the parts. Then finally, a different segment, if you go to your slow or non-moving critical spares, there you need to have them, because if you don't have it, then the complete production process can stop. So you need to have it, but you don't have the statistics to back a proper inventory decision. That is why we need business intelligence. And the business intelligence primarily comes from maintenance and production. And we capture that information in the so-called decision tree. And that is how you do that in the best way, but it's never perfect. So you also need a backup from your suppliers. And this is the real difficult stuff, because normally these parts are only supplied by your OEMs, they are monopolists, but here you really need a professional procurement function to arrange for availability agreements with these parties. So what you see, obviously, the critical spare parts need the majority of the attention, both from the maintenance, but also from procurement point of view. The other ones need less attention. So there's also a way to balance your attention from the organization across the various categories. So this is all very important to start up your inventory optimization process. If you go to the next element, which is on the maintenance demand. So we already saw some very open reflections by the people in the chat. When it comes to let's say the demand requisition process itself. But what you actually want is a disciplined and structured process. You don't want a situation where maintenance people do not really know what they want. So they go to the stores, they do some window shopping, unpacking a lot of stuff, leaving a mess behind, and maybe they request it afterwards. That is really not what you want. What you want is actually all the elements that you see below. And it's extremely important to use your enterprise asset management system for that. And that is also be for a discussion later. It is vital for any further, let's say, stock management decision. The second part is to do a demand segmentation. It's not like a black box that everything is the same, because everybody understands that there will be a mix of maintenance tactics, as you can see in the middle below. It can be breakdown or ad hoc, leading to unplanned maintenance, and that's why you need just-in-case inventory. But if it's planned maintenance or semi-planned maintenance, then obviously the spares demand will also be planned or semi-planned. And then you can make a different plan, possibly leading to a mix of just-in-case or just-in-time supply chain concepts. So, and that is all, of course, very important to ultimately get your stock availability against a minimal working capital. That's why you need this insight as well. Again, extremely important to have your asset enterprise management system in place. The third part is the criticality part. We often hear, Willem, everything is important. And they say, why? Why is everything important? And then it's often emotion that comes into play. But what you actually need to have is a proper differentiation into on the various levels of criticality, possibly low, medium, high, and they are based on a solid framework. And there is a picture, just as an example below, where you look at process criticality, asset criticality, and supply chain criticality. That is really what you need. So this basis is also one of the key ingredients that we work together with Pragma on. Then we go to the third foundation. It starts about spares planning. Again, not rocket science, so it seems, but there's more to it than you think. Because this classification not only sort of dictates the management concept, but also the mathematical concept and your organizational concept. Let's look at it slightly more in detail. So we got your fast movers in your left column and your slow movers in your right column. And there's the cheap ones in your row below and your expensive one in your upper row. Let's take two examples. If you got your cheap fast movers in the box left below, typically what you want from a management point of view, a very high stock availability, but you want to do it very efficiently, as I just mentioned as well. So you want to automate it as much as you can. That is what you want from a management point of view. But from a mathematical point of view, it is just statistical methods. And actually, the real challenge is here to do anomaly detection, to see where it goes wrong. That is the real challenge, not so much in the statistical methods. And then finally, organizationally, this is typically what you can do, the inventory controller can do. Maintenance does not have to be involved. Sorry for that, but there's not really a must that maintenance can add here. In the just in case, on the right top, that is the real difficult part. There you do need stock as a management objective, but you want to keep the working capital reasonable. From a mathematical point of view, this requires real tough modeling. There are some real scientific papers written on these ones, but even they are not enough. So that's why we need business intelligence, and that's from an organizational point of view, we need to have maintenance on board for this one, to define what is critical, what is a typical demand quantity, etc., etc. So this is this classification again gives you an idea, you know, how am I going to manage it, organize it, and support it with proper mathematics. So I'm going to go to the next slide. Let's go ahead to Gribben. So again, it is not that easy, but often what we see at our clients, that it is a belly feeling decision, and I don't know, Gribben, do I have a time for one intermediate question to the people in the chat?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, maybe I can ask you. There's an answer A or an answer B. Answer A is, do you base your inventory decision on belly feeling? Or answer B is, do you apply a proper model for it? So answer A is belly feeling. Answer B is a proper model. I hope you're still with me. Yeah, I got some A's. I got some B's. Fantastic. Some A's. I got some B's. Wow, I'm impressed. Or maybe the majority doesn't want to answer. But okay, I got some A's and some B's. That is actually quite good. Even more B's. But that's good, because then you have come to a point that you at least have been able to rationalize decisions. That is good. So it's a bit of a mixed picture. If we go then to the next slide, you know, it is almost impossible to manage your stock manually or to manage it by Excel. There's just too many spares and it is just too complex. So what you typically need is some decision support, very practical decision support that allows you to do the segmentation as described earlier, but also to do management by exception, that you don't have to go through all the parts, but you go to, that you only deal with the parts that have an exception or anomaly. And those parts are the parts that you're going to analyze in a very visualized way. So this is typically what you would like and what is typically not in an ERP system. Okay, finally, I go to the last topic in the last couple of minutes. And that is really, you know, how to create a business process out of inventory management. And the business process is actually a monthly process that we call a plan, do, check, act cycle. And what do you need to do for that? What are the ingredients? First, it is essential to define responsibilities. What does an inventory manager do? What does a procurement people do? What do maintenance people do? As discussed earlier. We need to train them. We need to train them in the concept. Actually, not only the inventory planner, but also all the people that are related to spares. Third, apart from the planning suite that I just sketched, we also need a KPI dashboard to monitor performance and to act on it. And then you can organize it. So how does it work? It is a monthly rhythm where each month, at the start of the month, you really
And Willem, you there?
parameters. And then I will speed up, I think you get a hint. And then it is important to monitor the performance. We don't live in an ideal world. There's always going to be parts that you will be stocked out, and you need only to learn from that. That's why you need a KPI dashboard. You need to monitor that, and you need to act on it. And that is a multidisciplinary part. So this is really the business process that need to be implemented. It is not really an easy journey, but there are enormous benefits. And the final comment that I would like to make is that this process also helps you through the tough times. We've seen that many clients, that when they've implemented this process, they came through, let's say, enormous disruptions like COVID, way better than organizations that did not have such a concept. So it's not only meant to manage your steady state situation way better, but it can also help you through enormous disruptions as we face these times. But that's it from my part. Over to you again, Gribben.
Maybe Enrico wants to just touch on this part.
Yeah, thanks, Gribben. Maybe just to summarize that, because I think as an audience member, the logic question should now be, but Pragma and Gordian, to manage my assets, you advise, or you at least advocate a proper EAMS system. And to manage my spare parts, you now also advise or advocate a proper spares planning platform. Is it really needed for me to have both of those systems as well as an ERP? And how do they integrate? And maybe as introduction then to Nicholas Gribben, I think it's important to understand that these platforms, as Jan-Willem explained, not only co-depend on the information available in each of the systems, but they also use that information to function optimally. And as responsible business owners, we are very aware of the needed integration, and that these platforms already include the ability to interact and integrate. But I'm going to hand back to you, Gribben. I'm sure Nicholas will tell us more.
Right. Thanks, Enrico and Jan-Willem. Definitely quite insightful. And I mean, you went quite quickly through it. I mean, there's a lot of detail behind it. And I think for the audience is really just to get an idea, what techniques there are, and in terms of what you need to do for planning space, and ideally just understand that and maybe get some more detail, from the likes of Gordian to see how you can actually apply that, within your organization. But I've got a statement that I would like to make, Enrico and Jan-Willem, and please let me know if you agree and if it's fair to say so. And I made some notes here as you guys were speaking. I mean, is it fair to say to create a structure and focus for spare parts optimization, we need to apply different strategies to different sub-assortments? Intuitively, planned demand of spare parts is preferred over unplanned demand from a logistics point of view, and supply and demand could be aligned more easily so that less stock is needed. Is that a fair statement to make?
It is an absolutely fair statement to make, because the more you can plan for the demand, the more reliable your supply chain will get. That is, I can only subscribe to that. Okay,
great. Because that's basically, what I take away from that. But obviously, the background and what we need to do, there's much more detail around that. But thanks for sharing that with us. Great. And now we go on to Nicholas, who will give us a little bit of insights about integrating and what we do from a Pragma perspective with OnKey, and integrating to other systems and how we do that. And I think it's important. I mean, obviously, Gordian has now mentioned, you know, we do the best practice in terms of managing your spares and understanding how to optimize your spares. But how do you get that information, you know, into your systems, and how do you use that information to make better decisions? And ideally, that's where, you know, Nicholas will take us through and give us an idea of certain concepts that we have in terms of integrating. Obviously, you know, all systems are different in terms of integrating, but the concept is still there in terms of how you want to integrate. So Nicholas, without further ado.
Yeah, thanks, Gribben. While I was listening to Jan Willem and Enrico speaking, you know, it's that age-old saying, you're never too old to learn something new. It's quite interesting for me. Obviously, spare parts automation and optimization is not my forte, but it certainly makes sense what you guys said, Jan Willem, Enrico. And just to continue with Enrico's last slide there about the different systems, I think that's where the integration now definitely comes into play. You have all these best of breed applications where you use different functionality, and it's then all about getting information across from one system into the next to be able to have information in the right place to do all the required analysis and updating and understanding, you know, exactly what needs to happen at what point. Maybe just a quick standstill on this current slide there. Obviously, from a Pragma perspective, we have developed quite a few different tools and components within our service offering. I don't want to stand still on all the rest. The one that's highlighted there is our division that we call OnKey Integrate. That is a whole division with a couple of developers that focuses just on how to integrate between different systems. We have selected already some time ago a product called Boomi. After obviously extensive research and market analysis, you know, we've decided on that. I think there was a very favorable analysis from Gartner that places that Boomi product within a certain quadrant that ticks most, if not all, of the boxes. Ease of development, the management of an integration solution, the monitoring of that, etc. All those things are quite important when it comes to integration. So we need to obviously do development quick. We need to monitor it, like I've said. And we have seen, you know, our experience in the last couple of years already that we've been using it, you know, the advantages of using a product like that to facilitate the different integrations that we have between systems. Okay, so Jakob, moving on, I think coming a little bit back to the spare parts optimization discussion, I think what we typically see is we have an on-key solution that does the maintenance side of it, obviously, and many clients will have an ERP or another system that they may want to use to just manage the spares in the purchasing, etc. So I think, you know, the key is always to understand what system is the master of a certain area. You don't want people to capture the same information twice in different systems. Preferably, you want them to only work in one system and also not in two systems. It causes confusion if you do that, training challenges, etc. So we will typically have some kind of an integration between two systems like that. There will obviously be consultation with the client to understand their business processes, etc. And that's just a rough indication of what we can typically do. So the master data being transferred, a requisition may be created for a spares request in OnKey that goes into the ERP that goes and follows the procurement process. The issuing, for instance, coming back, returning to store, and then obviously different statuses to track the progress of that. So that's a very, very high level potential solution that we can implement with integration to make the different transactions and master data available between two systems like OnKey and your ERP. If we move on to the next slide, maybe a little bit more detail. So if we talk about the master data that we can typically integrate between systems, we talk about entities like warehouses, general ledgers, the suppliers, master lists, stock items, buyers, etc. And it's not limited to those things. Like I said, there will typically be a consultation with a client to understand their business processes. Some have very simple business processes, some more complicated and complex business processes that they want to do between the different systems, and that will impact the integration. If we move on to the last slide, just a typical example of the transactional data that we will do to support basically the business processes, spare requests, records between the ERP system, bi-directional data flow that we mentioned there, statuses so that people can, for instance, see what's happening with my purchase order. Technician has the request in OnKey, that request goes to the ERP, and we can potentially update the OnKey side so that he has visibility on that as things happen in the ERP. And then obviously, last but not least, error notifications as well. Sometimes something that most people overlook, you think everything's going to run smoothly, but there's errors sometimes that creeps in because of configuration, items that's maybe not fully configured, etc. You want that visibility, and from an interfacing perspective, we can pick up on these errors. We can handle them as per whatever the design will be. So yeah, I think the key thing then to take away from this, Gribben, is to just put it out there for the clients that's interested in a spare parts optimization process. We've seen what Jan Willem has said. There's a lot of analysis that can happen. There's a lot of information available, or that needs to be available to make all these decisions. So ultimately, the information will sit in your ERP and within your OnKey system. And we can then, with integration, pull out the relevant information and transfer it to their analysis tool, where the analysis now can happen. And I would imagine, there would also be different levels of information depending on the maturity. So whatever is needed, as long as that has been configured or is utilized, or the transaction exists within the OnKey or the ERP environment, we can, from an integration perspective, read that information, pass it on to their system where the analysis can happen. And then based on the result of that analysis, we're talking about how many items do you need to keep in stock, depending on the outcome of your analysis. That answer we can now write back to the ERP so that the procurement department knows they have to keep XYZ numbers of these spares in stock. So that they understand whether they need to buy and when not to buy, for instance. So I think that's the take out that I want to pass on to the audience in terms of integration. Just be aware of integration is very much possible. We have the tools available that makes use of the latest technologies to integrate with systems, from security, best practices, and all those key points that's important. We have it available. We will typically sit around the table, understand your business process, maybe with the guys from Gordian to understand what they need, and then we can integrate the different components with one another to obviously get the end result we need. That's yeah. Unless there's any specific questions, Gribben, I think, but that's what I can bring to the table today.
Thank you, Nicholas, and yeah, thanks for giving us that insight, and letting the audience know that it's possible at the end of the day. I mean, that's the idea behind this webinar, was really just to create awareness and educate the audience in terms of what's possible. And I mean, also for me, what's important besides the information that we're getting between the two systems is also the practicality of it, within organizations. I mean, obviously the best practice is really, you don't want people working, one person working on two systems. And integration really helps where you have your maintenance team, doing what they need to do on the maintenance system, or the EAMS system, or the CMMS system. And you want your store guys, issuing spares or whatever, and the procurement guys to really work on, their ERP system. And hence why the integration is so important, because, you don't have, multiple, or one person's working on multiple systems trying to get transactions through. So it creates that efficiency as well, besides getting the data that we need to see in terms of reporting and doing analysis and everything.
Correct. I always say, an integration is it's just an automation of something that you could do manually. So like you say, I mean, I can now capture in the one system, go into the other system and recapture that same thing on that side. But I mean, that is not effective. So we integrate something and we automate that step. Like you say, it brings the, a less complicated environment to an end user. And likewise, I mean, we can manually export information to Excel and import it again onto the space optimization side, but that's not effective. I mean, we want to integrate it, let these things happen seamlessly. It brings all those benefits to the table.
No, I agree. Definitely agree. I think that's where, where the value comes. And we think about it, that's your digital transformation, in terms of digitalizing your processes to become more efficient. But thanks, Nicholas. Appreciate that.
Thanks,
thanks for your time. I'm not sure if this was a slide that you just wanted to also comment on, or are you done?
Yeah, I think we've talked about these items already now.
Right.
So yeah, it's just like I said, the integration is all to support your business processes. The design of it, the integration between the systems. We've talked about the custom integrations that's possible, obviously. Again, maybe just to emphasize the importance of not just doing an integration for the sake of integrating, but to understand what is the information that you need to flow between the different systems, and then obviously to automate that, to facilitate an easy business process operation.
Thanks, Nicholas. Great stuff. Great. And then, yeah, just to the audience as a conclusion, as a takeaway as well, if anything else, ideally the process you need to follow. I mean, there's really just, 3 steps that we've now, concluded on and summarized. And it's really the first step. One is really to understand your spare parts dynamics. All right. So it's very important to understand that. Do you know your assortment profile, what you currently store and what your demand requires you to store? Understanding your spare parts dynamics also means understanding the key issues. It's availability, the burning problems, having the right spare at the right time. Does your plant suffer downtime due to unavailable spares? You need to understand that dynamics. Or do you perhaps have excessively high working capital? So those are the things that you need to understand, as your step 1. Step 2, ensuring your spare parts foundations are in place. I mean, that's critical. If you look at the roadmap that we spoke about, there's the asset management roadmap, and there's the Gordian spare parts roadmap as well. You need to make sure you get your spare parts or your foundations in place for your spare parts. And effective spare part management remains an idyllic concept in foundations such as master data management, classification, and basic processing if it's not in place. Effective foundations form the basis of rationalization and eventually optimizing your spares. So definitely step 2, quite important. Once you have your step 1 or you understand your dynamics, step 2, get your foundations in place. And then of course the step 3, addressing poor availability. and obtaining visibility in your organization. And hence why we're talking about this, looking at the data flow, looking at analytics, looking at the reporting, getting information seamlessly, processed. Is really to make sure, your maintenance must have the visibility into the spares availability, and of course, how much spares do they have. Maintenance also needs to track and visualize the planning and procurement processes. So it's something obviously what we've been speaking about, and really just want to emphasize the importance of managing your spares better, and of course making sure you find different techniques within your organization, what suits you, to be able to establish that better spares management and optimization, and of course making sure your information is visible in terms of how you want to make decisions. So yeah, so that's us today. Just want to thank you for your time. I'm not sure if there's any questions, Nkamso. We've got a couple of minutes. We can probably answer some questions if there's some questions in the Q&A. Nkamso?
We do not have any questions, Kribben, in the Q&A.
Okay. Cool. So, I mean, we're recording the session, so we will also send out the recording to everyone. And I just want to again thank Gordian for their time. They flew all the way from Netherlands for this webinar. No, I'm kidding. They are here also on business, and they just so happen to be in South Africa and in Gauteng at the moment. And we want to thank them for taking the time and sharing the expertise with us. And of course, Nicholas, your expertise as well. Really appreciate your time. And of course, Nkamso, for your timekeeping and keeping us all in check. So yes, audience, everything of the best and have a good day further. Thank you.
Thanks.